Do me a favor and think of the one thing that has always bothered you about Catwoman, and this episode, I believe, fixes it. Let's talk about it.
That's not a character flaw, is it?
Batman Caped Crusader, Episode 3, Kiss of the Catwoman. Pretty good episode. I think that now we feel like we're picking up some steam, or at least in my mind, I'm getting used to what these episodes are and this kind of new environment, new series, and sort of throws out some of the rules and eliminates some of the expectations. We're even seeing a different Batman / Bruce Wayne. We see Bruce Wayne lose his cool and punch a reporter. Now, that's a big element of the story as we go into it, so I understand why that needed to happen. But it also really sort of, again, takes you back a minute and goes, oh wow, here's a little bit of Batman bleeding through the Bruce Wayne persona, where all bets are off now. Also, before I get too far into this episode, I do want to say this is going to contain spoilers for the episode. So if you haven't watched this episode yet and are on the fence whether you should or not, and you came to this review, watch it. It's good. It's enjoyable. If you like Batman, if you like Catwoman, this is a great episode. So pause the video here, go watch the episode, and come back, and then you can hear my whole review, because this is your spoiler alert right up front. It's a newer episode. It just came out a few weeks ago, so I don't want to ruin anything for you, but I want to be very cohesive in my review. So of course, Bruce Wayne punching the reporter leads to him having to go to therapy, and of course his therapist is Dr. Quinzel. So this is presumably the introduction of Harley Quinn into the series. This goes along with that original mythos of Harley Quinn, is that she was a therapist. Now, in this, it doesn't appear that she's a criminal psychologist working at Arkham Asylum. And certainly we haven't met Joker, so we don't know if there's a relationship there yet at this point. But she's a therapist, and a court-ordered therapist, so I assume she's not working at Arkham. And in fact, we haven't even seen Arkham, so I don't know if that exists here in this world just yet. You know, earlier in the episode, the reason that Bruce Wayne punches the reporter is the reporter makes a crack about the pearls that his mom was wearing when she gets, hopefully this isn't a spoiler, murdered. And this is a running joke in our household. My wife thinks it's funny every time. She goes, they can't tell a Batman story without doing the origin story of his parents getting killed. And every time they do that, you see the pearls flying up in the air and the dropping. It's so dramatic. I don't know what the origin of that is, and I never really made the connection until my wife pointed that out. They don't show that in this one. However, they do make a reference to her pearls being on display, which I had to share with my wife. That I think it's a
disaster.
I think they know what they're doing. It's very comical. But when we're in the therapy session talking with Dr. Quinzel, I keep wanting to call her Harley Quinn, not yet, it leads to a flashback of Bruce Wayne. And again, it's a story we've seen so many times. We've heard it told. We know Batman's origin, and it gets a little exhausting sometimes, especially in a series like this, where it's like, we have 10 episodes. Don't burn up an episode doing the origin story. So a couple of things they do really well is they don't just do a straight origin. They don't just show little Bruce watching his parents get murdered, like that story we've seen 100 times. They do kind of a different perspective on it, and they kind of refocus the attention. It's almost told through Alfred's eyes, I feel like. And the other thing that they did well is it's the third episode, right? So we've already seen Batman, we've already seen Bruce Wayne, we've already established those characters, and we're not starting with this long origin story. I think that's what bothers me sometimes, is it's like, I want to just jump into a series. I know who Batman is, I know who these characters are, I know what's going on, so just tell the story. I don't need to spend all the time with the backstory. It burns up the first episode. So I like that they do that. And also, we introduce Catwoman. And as I mentioned, they do something really well in this episode that I think fixes something that at least has bothered me about Catwoman, and I'll talk more about that. But we see Selina Kyle admiring the jewels and building the elements of the cat burglar side of Catwoman, which is cool. We see Selina Kyle meeting Bruce Wayne, and that's the first interaction that we see, not Catwoman and Batman. And that leads to what I think that they really fixed in this episode is we lean much too heavy on the Batman, Catwoman romantic relationship. And then there's the duality of Bruce Wayne and Selina Kyle. They did it in Batman Returns. They did it in the animated series. And they do it in the comic books. And to me, it takes me out of it a little bit, because if you're that close with somebody in a relationship, I hope you would be able to tell the difference if they take a mask on or put a mask on, or, you know, like that identity thing. I know, suspension of disbelief. So they corrected that in this episode, which I really appreciate.
You're really no fun at all.
No.
Now we see Selina as just an admirer of jewels, an admirer of fine things. We get the impression that she came from money or inherited or trust fund baby or something like that, and is now down on her luck. So now we have a motive for why she becomes a cat burglar, which is, again, a different take. In the animated series, it was she had all this money and she was a philanthropist and trying to save wildlife and animals and things like that. As a means of doing that, she funded that through cat burglary, which kind of gives a more of a motive of like trying to do good, but just going about it the wrong way, the anti-hero thing. This one, as much as I'm not a big fan of just being motivated by money, I think it's kind of fun that she just straight up is a cat burglar. And we have that adversarial relationship.
What can I say? I like nice things.
The other thing that they do really well with this character, and this is almost a blanket statement to any sort of villain or hero, is she decides, oh, I'll just steal some jewels to pay back my debt. And do we still have a sewing machine? She gets a sewing machine. She makes this costume. She likes cats. Here's our theme. And goes out and is not very good.
I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
We don't see that very often. We often see, oh, I put on a hero costume and I can swing from buildings and I can run and I can jump and I can fight and I can, all these acrobatics. She's not really good and gets caught fairly easily by the police. I like that. That is something we don't see a whole lot, is that sort of flawed character, flawed villain that is like, yeah, they had this idea of, oh, why not? I'll do this. And it doesn't go well for them. I like that.
I'm trying, Your Honor.
So yeah, I think that, you know, having her be more of a flawed villain, a flawed character, just has an idea and a sewing machine and doesn't work out well for her is kind of a neat dynamic. Now, in some of the past reviews that I did, I've been a little hard on this animation style. In this episode, it became apparent that I think what I have the biggest issue with this style is in the dialogue and in the kind of static shots of just two people talking. Because the action sequences in this episode in particular, especially Batman and Catwoman running across the rooftops and that whole sequence, is really pretty strong. I thought that it was really engaging. I like the light, the neon lights and all that kind of fun stuff. The shots and the angles and the animation and all of that, the high animation moments, I thought were really good. I think my issue is those static kind of dialogue shots, which give me feels of like the old Hanna-Barbera cartoons where they're just frozen and all they do is move their arm.
I'm smarter than the average bear.
But yeah, the action sequence, I thought the animation was good and I sort of like enjoyed watching those moments. But again, they don't really rely on that. And I don't know what else they could do, you know, just to breathe a little more life into the other parts. But yeah, I wish they did more. That's all.
So do I.
And this episode also really spends, you know, it's certainly a focus of Catwoman, and we have kind of the story going on with Dr. Quinzel and Bruce Wayne. But what it does is it gives an opportunity to spend more time with Alfred. And like I said, the flashbacks really feel like more of an Alfred point of view than anything else. And I really like this interpretation of Alfred. I like that he is sort of a strong character on his own. A lot of times we see Alfred as just Batman's assistant, right? Bruce Wayne's assistant, kind of both. But this one, like, he really kind of drives some scenes and is really keeping track of his calendar, telling him what to do and where we go and encouraging him in different directions. And I sort of like that angle of Alfred being the person that knows Bruce Wayne and Batman the best to really kind of help steer and guide him and be that father figure that we don't always get to see. And I like that. Certainly in the flashbacks, we see this with young Bruce Wayne, where he is kind of shielding him and ushering him through this. Although it does lead to one of the creepiest scenes I've seen in this, which is so odd, which is this when little Bruce Wayne gets out of bed at night and then opens up the door into Alfred's room and goes, "We're gonna stop them and we're gonna get them all." Very creepy. Those eyes of the little kid. That's where the animation helps it, because it's like very static and just the door swings open and silhouette of the boy, and pretty creepy, and kind of has a darker tone. But again, that's the element that we don't always lean into, is like this little boy makes this very dark decision to stop these villains by beating them up and making them pay, and vengeance and all that kind of thing. Kind of dark for a whatever he is, 10-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old.
What? Come on.
One of the things that they talked about with this series that I was interested to see was that this being supposed to be darker and more geared for adults, kind of not being tied down to Fox Kids Network going, hey, let's make it for kids, let's kind of, keep it happy and fun. And it's interesting that that's the element that they were trying to lean into. And I don't know, maybe it's just perspective, because I am an adult now and I've seen so many dark, scary things now on television that this doesn't seem that as dark. Certainly there's scenes like that I just described that are pretty dark in this. But I would say overall, not that the show's lighthearted, but it's kind of mellow.
Oh my.
Certainly I wouldn't say it's made for kids. And it's not like a, Batman Brave and the Bold sort of rendition, or a 60s Batman, or, it's not a light, campy Batman. I mean, it's definitely darker than what we've seen in some of the other renditions of it. I don't know what I expected when they said it was going to be darker. I think I was anticipating some of the animated shows that are really driven for adults is what I maybe expected. Certainly I don't think this is for kids, but it seems kind of tame or sort of mellow compared to some of the adult-oriented cartoons. And when I say adult, I mean like, older thematic elements, not adult cartoon. That's a totally different thing.
I have no idea what you mean.
There's certainly scenes or glimpses of that, and I can definitely tell how they sort of course-corrected some of the elements that they weren't able to do with the original Batman the Animated Series. But I don't know, we'll see where it goes from here. Maybe it gets darker, maybe there's more adult themes as we go into this, but we haven't seen a lot of blood. Yes, they're shooting guns, but they did that before, it's just they always missed. The violence is pretty much on par, I'm interested to see where it goes from here. But overall, I think that there's a lot of elements that are in this episode as I go back and think about it. We introduce Catwoman, we introduce Dr. Quinzel, who presumably will become Harley Quinn. We see a little bit of Batman's backstory, Bruce Wayne, young Bruce, the murder of his parents, all that, which builds a bigger relationship, and we see more of Alfred. Just a lot of neat things. We see sort of a different side of Bruce Wayne where he is a little violent. Again, that's sort of a darker element we wouldn't have seen in the other one. So there's a lot that's jam-packed into this episode, and I always tend to favor towards that. I would rather see more than not enough, right? And this certainly delivers on we see a lot more in that regard.
Love that we're on the same page.
And I think I really like the interpretation of Catwoman. And don't get me wrong, I liked what they did in Batman the Animated Series with her, but they do lean into some of the tropes that, again, is just a little unoriginal at this point. But maybe they were one of the first ones to do it. I don't know. As I think about Catwoman episodes, one of the ones that I still think is way underrated is from the Batman the Animated Series, Tiger, which is just a great interpretation of Catwoman and a story and emotional elements. And if you want to see my full review for that, click the card on the screen to check that out. And I will see you in the next episode.